Today we're baking an Easter specialty from the Valle Camonica region of northern Italy. It is called spongata. It is basically composed of a sweet brioche dough. So we're going to start by mixing flour, yeast, and milk. So before I add the milk, I'm going to mix up the yeast inside the flour. This is what we're doing now. It's basically a preferment. And now we're going to add the milk. And we're going to mix. Going to mix it until it comes together. Like this. It will resemble kind of a very thick pancake batter. And voila. And then what we're going to do, we're going to leave this one, cover it of course, and then we're going to leave this one on the counter in a warm counter to rise, to double in size before we move on to the next step. It took about an hour and a half for the starter, the preferment, to actually double in size. It was about 1 cup and now it's about 2 cups. So we're going to start by putting the preferment into our bowl. There you go. And then we're going to move on to the eggs. I have 2 full eggs and 2 egg yolks. What I'm going to do here is actually mix them up a little bit first before I put them in the... There you go. I'm just going to whisk them a little bit. There you go. And I'm just going to put them in. Perfect. Let's get some of this yolk from the fork. Beautiful. And then we have sugar, flour. I'm just going to put it together. I'm going to put a pinch of salt. And I'm gonna put all of this into the bowl. Now, one important thing to remember, I chilled the bowl, the hook, and the flour and sugar into the freezer. With this particular type of dough, you want all the ingredients to be very chilled, but for the butter. The butter should be kind of like room temperature, so it's gonna be pliable, but you know, not runny. And here we got the dough hook, and we're gonna start mixing the ingredients until they all come together. Once they start mixing a little bit, I'm gonna hike up the speed, see where we're at. One thing to remember with this particular recipe is to be patient. It will take time for everything to come together, especially once we start adding the butter. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape down the sides a little bit. And we're going to go back. Once the sides have been cleared up, meaning everything is being incorporated. What we're gonna do is add the butter 1 cube at a time. What this is gonna do is it's gonna allow the butter to be incorporated little by little fully before we add the next cube. That's a very important step. Again, this is all about going slow. Let everything work together, okay? As you can see, you can still see a streak of the butter in the dough. So we're gonna let it all incorporate before we move on to the next cube of butter. Now, if all of a sudden the dough kind of sticks to the bottom, we can always shut it off and go in and kind of, with the spatula, kind of lift it up a little bit. And then go back to work. As you can see, the consistency of the dough has changed since before we put the butter in. As the batter gets incorporated, the consistency changes and it becomes more brioche-like. And finally, the last cube of butter. Once the butter has been all incorporated, you should end up with a sticky dough, but still a dough that, you know, is kind of like still together. If for whatever reason, you know, humidity or what have you, you know, the dough is still a little bit too sticky, you can always add a little bit of flour at a time, tablespoon or a teaspoon at a time, just to make it all come together. And now, here you go. Scrape down the hook of all this goodness. Perfect. And what we end up here is this nice and supple dough. What we're gonna do now is, I personally leave it in the mixing bowl. What I'm gonna do is basically cover it up and let it again rise until it doubles. After that, we're gonna divide it and proceed with the recipe. It took about 3.5 hours to get the dough to double in size. One other trick is two other tricks actually. One is to start de-rising at room temperature, you know, like 70, 80 degrees. Then move the dough in the refrigerator overnight. That will actually help the flavor, and finish up the rising the next day if it hasn't doubled in size in the refrigerator. The second trick is actually to use the SAF Gold Instant yeast. This is a strain of yeast that has actually been developed to help the fermentation with sugary doughs like this dough, like, you know, the brioche dough. That will actually help speed up, if you will, the rising in that particular case. Well, we move on. In this case, what we're gonna do is, as you can see, it actually doubled in size. We're taking out the dough, and as you can see, I have a scale. What I'm gonna do is measure the size, measure the weight of the actual little balls of dough that we're gonna make. I'm gonna do two sizes today. The traditional size for spongata is about 150 grams, where I'm gonna do a smaller size as well, and we'll see at the end for what reason, which is about 100 grams. So we're gonna basically start cutting up our dough, measuring it, This one is about 120 grams. And this is about 148. So, oh, this is gonna escape. And then what we're gonna do is gonna make it into a nice little ball. Just twist it in around. And then what I'm gonna do is like this, kind of make it a little oblong. And I'm gonna cut a slice with my lame in the middle, like this. We'll see why I'm gonna do that later. And then we continue. Again, trying to aim for about 150 grams. This is 142. There you go, 154. And then I'm gonna make it into a nice ball. Trying to smooth it out. That's what I'm trying to do here. And if you have any problems, you can always stretch it a little bit like we do with pizza dough. As you can see, now it gets a little nice and smooth. And then roll it around, make it into a little oblong, like this. And then with lame, nice little cut. I don't go too low. As you can see, it's probably about, what, about 50% of the way, maybe a little less, maybe 40% of the way. And voila. So let's try to make a smaller one now, about 100. Well, this is 100 even, perfect. And again, put it all together, roll it around in your hands. There's also another advantage of putting the dough into the fridge overnight. It will cool down the butter that it's in the dough. That actually makes, you know, kind of gives a little bit of an insurance, I guess, when we would do this one with warm hands. So here is the smaller 100 grams. Again, we're gonna do this one here. And these ones I'm actually not going to cut. Actually, for these ones, I'm gonna put them in a different sheet tray, just because they're gonna cook at a different, same temperature, but different timing. These will of course cook faster than those ones. And I'll move on. And voila, gonna have 4 and 4. What we're gonna do at this point, gonna space them a little bit more. These of course are gonna double in size again. So what we're gonna do is basically, we're gonna close them, let them prove to double in size, and when we'll come back, we'll go to the next step and then finally baking. About 3 hours have passed, and the spongade have now doubled in size. The next step will be to take the spongade, brush them with a little bit of egg yolk mixed with a little bit of milk. And what we're gonna do is just brush them all over, especially in the middle. what we're gonna do now is actually get some sugar with a spoon, and we're gonna sprinkle it all over the center. As you noticed, I'm not really putting any, not really, besides some spillover, on the sides, but mostly in the center to create a nice crust. So these ones are the regular sized spongade, what they will rise again in the oven. And then we're gonna do, as you noticed, I'm putting a towel and also some saran wrap if you don't have a cover. And what we're gonna do here, this one again will be a different story. So here, I'm just gonna brush all over, but I'm not gonna put any sugar in these ones. And voila, what we're gonna do now with these ones, we're gonna go in the oven, a 350 degrees oven, for about 20-30 minutes. And here we are. After about 25 minutes, we've got success. As we discussed, we have the traditional size. This is the typical spongata you would find in the Valle Camonica region in the Alps of Italy. And these are my smaller size that we're gonna do something with it right now. And now is the time to use this small spongata that we made. We're gonna take one spongata, serrated knife, and what we're gonna do is cut it down the middle just a little bit. As you can see, just a little bit that we can open it. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put a little bit of pastry cream at the very bottom. There you go. And that always helps. And then this is whipped cream that I'm gonna stash on top of the pastry cream. Voila. And then we're using an offset spatula to clean it all up. And leveling off. Basically, the spongata. So we got some filling now. And to finish it off, what we're gonna do later is actually dust it with a little bit of powdered sugar. And again, cutting down the middle, a little bit of pastry cream at the bottom, and whipped cream. and then we wipe. Wipe away the excess. Voila. And here's the next one. Helps to wipe up the knife. Now, another option would be to kind of go down at a bias like this, kind of cut out a V, and then we can fill it with the pastry cream. Voila. And whipped cream again. Again, offset spatula. Voila. And one more. Now, you can fill it up with pretty much anything you want. You can basically do chocolate, you can do some raspberry jam, any type of jam, you know, and you can let your creativity guide you. In this particular case, we're using like sweetened whipped cream. With some pastry cream added at the bottom, just to give it a little more oomph. Okay, and the next step, the final step, is we take some powdered sugar. And voila, another way of using smaller spongate. In this case, we made a filled spongata. In Rome, they call these ones maritozzi. However they're called, enjoy.